Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another game dev stream. Just setting up my workspace here, just give me a few moments. Okay, we should be good to go. So, if you guys followed my previous video that I posted for the January build update, I featured some adverse status effects for the confused state, I believe. Now, we're basically going to be going through how I did that process, but instead of redoing work I've already done, I'm going to build out the adverse status effect for poison, or for being poisoned. Okay, so to begin with, the first thing I gotta do is come over to Vance's blueprint here. We're going to be using him today. And we're going to look for his basic attack, and we're going to, he doesn't actually have this ability, but we want the basic attack to proc poison with a 100% chance of success. This is basically for debugging. That's not how he functions typically. So now when his basic attack triggers, right here, where we send that attack to the referee, it will pass along that property we built in for the poison state. Now, we have to come over to, I think the enemy class here. And this is the event that will get triggered by the combat referee, and it'll apply the, it'll go through the switch and switched on the input selection, which we have set to be poison. You can see the confused state is already plugged in because that is in the January build. And poison's right here, so we can basically, when that event is called, we want to call an effect. I'll have to check this out from the source control. Okay, that looks good. And yeah, we can apply the poison state right now. This won't actually mean anything. This is just a struct of different booleans that tracks characters' states. But what we can do here is, use a handy print string and determine whether or not this is being called. It should work. Poison. Oh my gosh, can't type. Poison effect activated. Okay. We can compile. And just in case there's a lot of debug print strings, I'll put it to 5 seconds. And let's get in there and see if it's called. So go to this enemy and okay, so hope the volume isn't too loud. Let me know if it is on your end. My microphone settings are different. Okay, so basic attack should call the poison state. Yeah, we definitely got something there. Okay, so our event has been called, which is perfect, right? Poison state is activated. Okay, so now we can build a function similar to adverse status confused, right? Because this status goes through and because we can't just have a status effect state being toggling a boolean, right? Like for example, the confusion state, it does our boolean toggles, but for our confused state, we spin the character around and then we call our particle effects to display like the head stun, sort of like seeing stars. So we have to do that we have to build a similar function for the poison adverse status effect. So we can actually duplicate that, right? So I'll duplicate that and we'll just call this poisoned. poisoned. Okay. And we'll open that up. Oh, it already is opened. And we want to toggle poison on if we're applying it, and poison to false if we are removing it. This probably is not necessary. Don't want to be spinning. We're applying this on our enemy class. When I apply it to the human classes, I will need to, not the human classes, but when I apply this to the non-monster based enemy classes, the poison effect will have to trigger the weak or low health stance on their animation blueprints. That's an option you guys can do on your own. If you're doing this for your own game, for applying status effects for poison, you can leave a note here with a comment. And we will call the debuff poisoned. And yet we're activating it on the apply and not. Okay. Let's go back to, this function up here. We want to call our function. So we can grab it and call it to apply. Yep, that is all good. And we know that this is going to work because our print string worked, which is really handy. Okay, so if we hop back into that function, we need to do some setup on this plugin. This is a plugin from the Unreal Marketplace that's pretty handy. It's a blueprint plugin for various status effects, and it's pretty easy to customize and add it to your own game design. It comes with a host of statuses. I added the poisoned one because there wasn't one here before. But you can easily do this on your character class blueprint. But because we have different character classes that all require status effects being applied to them, we just decided to use a plugin instead. So the blueprint is a component in the character class. You can see it here. Vid particle status is the name of the plugin. So the first thing we got to do is, we have to follow their template they've established here. We don't want a head effect, we want a status effect. So I'm just going to drag this up and duplicate this. And I'm going to need to make a new variable here, or those will be easy enough. I'm going to promote this to variable and call this debuff status. Actually, I have some add-ons I've put in here. We're going to call this poisoned fx underscore reference. And from here we can plug into poisoned. And this is what we're calling. Okay, so these are, I have a legend here. How handy. Okay, so oranges are for, the orange coin boxes I've decided are for battle mode mechanics. It's a little, there's a lot going on in this plugin. Like I said, it's in the marketplace, so I wanted to keep my work separate from the default as it comes. So I've color-coded my coin boxes accordingly. And so, similar to stun, we're going to use a nearly an identical the execution is identical in this case for toggling the various states on the character classes. So I will just duplicate them. Confused, sorry. Poisoned, get rid of that. Okay, so, yep, so we take our saved effect and applies a temporary particle system. This is wrong. This is a default one that I duplicated from. Our particle effect instead is going to be one I have modified, this one. So we can come back to our blueprint and apply this as the default value for our... Actually, I applied to the wrong one there. We're going to undo that. We want to apply to the default of our new variable here. The temporary particle is always changing, so it doesn't really matter. It's what its default is. So now I have our good particle system poisoned. Set up so that is spawned to the above the head point. I think I want to use the body point, if I'm going to be honest. Yeah, body center point. So we'll use that. The good particle system is actually like a pretty cool toolkit. I decided to just buy it rather than building this out on my own. It comes with a pretty easy user guide, but basically you have these name points that are saved as variables that reference the skeletal system, and when you apply it to a character class, it asks you, well, you set your default particles, which is all fine, and then it asks you for these points, which are slots on the skeleton, and you fill them in here on the character class. That way, wherever you place any character that has a good particle status system in as a component will automatically work with the plugin, which is really handy when you have multiple character classes. Oh, that's a mouthful. Okay. Oh, head stun. I see. Okay, I want to make one more duplicate, and we're going to call this debuff status semicolon poisoned. And we're actually going to have to compile, and then we're going to apply default to here. This is actually a sort of a reference I use to delete the particle in world. And that's why we want it to be separate here. All right, fantastic. Okay, that looks pretty good. Size can be scaled as needed. I'm going to save all my actors, or all the active blueprints. There we go. Okay, so let's do a quick test. If we go to Vance's battle mode blueprint, or actually we could go to his exploration mode blueprint. Actually, you know what? Let's just try and inflict that effect onto our enemy actor here. Okay, so he's definitely poisoned. Yeah. It's at his feet though, which is probably a result of the name slots on his character not being defined. Yeah, so yeah, you can see the body point center name is referencing the root point, which is incorrect. if we go to his skeleton, we should be able, whoops, we should be able to grab, yeah, it's called center point. And that's actually the naming conventions they recommend in the literature for the plugin. Okay, so we can just go to center point and call this center. I should lower my volume. I feel like it's probably really loud for you guys when I'm playing. It sounds loud for me.
You ready, Maya?
Okay, yep, so we can see the effect has been called. He's displaying as if he's poisoned. No actual functionality, just the visual effects of it. But that's cool, that's cool. That's exactly what we want. Okay, let me just look at my notes here. So to build out the actual poison functionality, we can probably... let's see what I did here for this enemy class. I have the confused check taking place here. So for poisoned, if I recall correctly, the concept is to implement it in a way where on enemy actions, after they are complete, the user suffers poison damage if they're poisoned. So similar to the confused check, which takes place on turn initialize, we should have the poison check probably take place on turn end. See, return to host battle grid, enemy attack done. It could be during, or it could be before as well. I think I might fine-tune the location, because now that I think about it, if I implement it at the turn's end, I'll have to do a bit more R&D live, which is a bit boring for you guys to watch, I imagine. So instead, I'm going to do the check here as well, so on turn start. So we're going to check if it is poisoned instead. And maybe we should be doing this first. Because if you're poisoned and you lose HP and you die before you can do anything, we should know if even if you're confused, you have to have enough HP. So it makes sense to do that first. Okay, so instead of... let's do a branch, and we are going to check on poison. So if the enemy class is poisoned, and this again is that same struct we apply when we call it from the combat referee. If it's true, we're going to do our function to check if we're going to execute as needed. And if false, we would go through here normally to our standard execution, but we have to do the confused check. And then if both are false, then you would route back through here. And if you're confused, you would check if you're confused, and if that's not confused, then you would do your confused action. And if you are confused, do your confused action. But that is neither here nor there. We just have to, I just don't want to ruin that functionality. So for now, it will exist as such. Okay, so if you are poisoned, we need to go into our character. We need to get our stats. Core stats? I think so. Nope, not the core stats, the primary stats. We're going to break this. And from here we can grab all these different variables that pertain to the character, that pertain to primary stats. What I want to get is the health points max. And I want to get, I think I want to divide it by a float. Or multiply it by a float, probably. We want to get about 6% or, 1/20th of the maximum health and subtract that. And how we would do that would be, we would use the combat referee because it has all the instructions on how to handle that exchange without, with displaying all the information, like the floating text and maintaining the turn sequence. So, and from here we would, let me just check the confused action with regards to animation montage. Oh, I see. Basically, we can do an enemy versus self-hit again. Yeah, so from the combat referee, we can pull out this function. And instead of doing a basic attack, we would... So this is a function I built for our combat referee to handle damage, like HP exchanges between various actors, whether it's enemy versus enemy, or player versus enemy, or player versus player, or I should say party member versus party member. And it inputs with an attack action, such as the basic attack or different skills. For the purpose of damage inflicted from poison, I can probably just make an attack action here, and we would toggle this as, this doesn't really matter, it's single target power value is basically our damage value, so this would truncate that value. And damage type, we'd want poison type, and no resources to adjust, because we're essentially simulating the poison damage taking place. So this is if we are true. So that damage would take place, and then we would branch, and then we have to check if we are still alive. Actually, let's just check to make sure this is working first, before I complicate the function anymore. Let's make sure each step is working. Okay. So our basic attack should...
Ready, Maya?
Excuse me. Our basic attack will poison him, and then on his turn initialize, he'll do a poison check. He will be poisoned because it's 100%, and he should inflict damage onto himself. Yep, he does. Okay. Perfect. We can close the skeleton. We can close the particle effect as well. And let's go back to... Whoops. We don't need all this. All these extra tabs. Okay, so... Once that effect is done, we just need to check if our health points, or if the enemy character's health points is equal to, or sorry, greater than, or well, actually, it should just be greater than 0. As long as he has at least 1 hit point left. He should be able to. And put a delay here as well. And if this is true, well, if it's true, really, it still has to check the confused. It has to do the confused check, because it is possible to have multiple status effect states, but in this case, we know it's false, so it'll execute through here, and actually, I don't need the delay here if we have one ahead, so let's try this out. Maya? Okay, we hit him. He is poisoned. He hurts himself. And now it's our turn. Working as intended. He's still poisoned. If we attack him again. Yep. That is pretty much how it's going to be. I will plan to move this function probably to the parent class, C_enemy, and call it in the same way I'm doing the confusion verification, because it gets a bit messy here. And I'll probably, yeah, it should probably be done on before you do your action. Before or after. If it is, I'll have to move it around. If not, it'll be fine to do all the checks here. Anywho, that should be it for the stream. I know it's been a long time since I've been doing these on a regular basis, but, you know, challenges with life and everything. But I'm going to try and do weekly dev streams, at least every Wednesday, going forward. I think that should be a pretty achievable goal, and then depending on how that goes, maybe I'll ramp it up as needed. But thanks for watching. If you guys want to play the builds we publish, you can check out my Patreon page. It's there for the patrons who opt in. And I'll see you guys in the next video.